Don't throw out your yarn scraps. Today we're going to talk about 12 ridiculously simple ways to use them up and to make some adorable projects. Hi, I'm Elise from the blog Le Petit Sans Crochet, and as a crocheter and knitter, we all end up with tons of yarn scraps. But the good news is that there are some really fun and simple ways that we can use up these scraps and actually make something with them. I used to throw away all of my yarn scraps, shame on me, and now I save them. So let's jump into the very first project. The first project are yarn pegs. Winding yarn pegs is a fantastic way to use up those yarn scraps while also making something useful. And I think they're so pretty. And the reason why you might want to wind some yarn pegs is because when you are trying to combine colors for a project like a crocheted blanket, amigurumi toys, or a knitted sweater, it easily allows you to lay them side by side so that you can see how the colors will look together, but you can also move them around to get the perfect color combination. You only need a few supplies to make your yarn pegs, and those are your scraps of yarn. I also bought some inexpensive clothespins from Amazon, and you'll also need a little marker to write down what your yarn is and which color it is. And you're also going to need more than just a tiny little strip of the color. This is perfect for when you have yarn scraps that are too small for an entire project, but that you have enough that you can actually wrap around the clothespin enough times that you can actually see the color. Then take a marker and write down the color and the brand of the yarn. Because if you're anything like me, you're gonna forget what it is in about 10 minutes. They really look so pretty that I could see them strung up across a little piece of twine or a little piece of ribbon in your little crafting area, and that could really bring inspiration when you're ready to work on a project. I even found some really beautiful photos of yarn pegs on Google Images as I was just scrolling through, and I just thought they looked so pretty, and so this is something that I'm going to definitely be doing. Now I want to offer one warning about yarn scraps. I originally was going to include using yarn scraps to offer to wild birds so that they could build their nests with them, but I've read some conflicting information about it, and I just wanted to pass it along to you guys as well. I love wild birds, and I actually spend a fortune in birdseed because the birds and the squirrels entertain my cats all the time, and that makes them happier. So that makes me happier when my cats are happy. But the thing is about yarn scraps is that if they are too long, it can actually strangle wild birds, especially the ones that are still in the nest. I also read that if you are going to offer wild bird scraps, they can be no longer than a couple of inches. They also need to be 100% natural fibers. And if you're going to offer cotton, it needs to be non-mercerized cotton. And one of the issues is that there are chemicals in processed yarn. Also, non-natural yarns actually absorb a lot of water, and that can damage the nests. So I'm not going to be offering the birds my scraps because it makes me a little bit nervous, and I've read some conflicting information about it, and I just would rather be safe than sorry. The original reason why I started saving yarn scraps was for stuffing for amigurumi toys. I mix it with the traditional polyfill stuffing, and I just stuff it down into the little body parts, the legs, the arms, the heads, and the little body cavities. The benefits of using yarn scrap for stuffing are, number one, it doesn't cost anything extra. Number two is that you can use scraps of any length, fiber, or color. And it's soft and mimics the feel of fiber fill. This is my go-to way for using up yarn scraps, and I keep this jar in my little craft cabinet in my living room so that every night after I'm done crocheting and knitting, I just grab my little scraps and stick it in the jar. It's also really pretty, and it reminds me of all the projects I've made. This next idea is so much fun. I cannot wait to do this one. One way to use up your scraps is to make a giant magic ball of yarn. I found this idea on mypoppet.com, and I'm going to leave links for everything that I'm talking about in the description box below. I'm pretty sure I forgot to tell you guys that at the beginning of the video, but you'll find a lot of resources always in the description box. So to make a magic yarn ball, you're going to need to separate your yarns into different weights. You're going to keep all the worsted weight scraps together, all the DK weight scraps together, all the bulky weight scraps together. Everything needs to be separated out. This is going to ensure that when you go to make something with your magic ball of yarn, that it's going to turn out nicely. There are two primary ways to be able to figure out what weight yarn you have. And the first and the easiest is just to look at the yarn label. You'll find words like light, medium, or bulky. You also might see numbers like 2, 3 or 4, or you might see words like DK, worsted, or Aran. But what if you don't have your yarn label? You can still figure out the weight with the WPI test. Now, I showed exactly how to do this in one of my previous videos about Dollar Tree yarn, and I will link it in the description box below as well. But the basic gist is that you are going to take your yarn and you're going to get a ruler and you're going to wrap the yarn around the ruler for 1 inch. Then you're going to count how many wraps are in that inch. You don't want to wrap it too tight or too loose, you just want it snug around the ruler. And how many wraps are in that inch will let you know which weight yarn you have. For example, a worsted or Aran weight yarn typically has anywhere between 9 and 12 wraps per inch. DK yarns typically have between 12 and 15 wraps per inch. Once you've separated all the yarns into the different weight categories, you can start joining them together. And the best way to do that is with a Russian join because there are no knots. But when you're going to be joining those yarns together, it needs to be a plied yarn. And all that means is that the yarns are created with individual strands that are twisted together. Most of the yarns that I use and most of the yarns that we are buying are plied, and you'll actually be able to see it when you look closely at your yarn and you see that little twist. It's a little more difficult to do a Russian join if you're using yarns like chenille, faux fur, and roving yarns. And there's a great tutorial on YouTube for the Russian join, and I will leave it in the description box below as well. You also won't be able to add a super short scrap of yarn to your magic yarn ball. You will need a decent length so that you can work it all, and you'll see how to do it with the tutorial. But the beautiful thing about this is that when you have a scrap, you can go ahead and add it to your magic yarn ball and continue to wind it up until you have enough that you can start your project. I think this would be so much fun to make a blanket with all those scrap yarns, and it can remind you of all the other projects that you've done, plus it uses up all those scraps. Making tassels is another great way to use up those yarn scraps. You only need yarn and a tassel maker, which can be something like this from Clover, or you can just use a piece of cardboard. There are so many things that you can make with tassels, like decorations for a blanket, keychains, pillow decorations, and jewelry. But there are also a lot of other things that you can make with tassels, and if you just do a little search on Pinterest, you will find so many amazing ideas. In addition to tassels, you can make pom-poms. These are so much fun to make, and they are so darn cute. And there are a lot of different DIY crafts that you can make with pom-poms, like a garland, bookmarks, a wreath, home decor accessories like curtain tiebacks, obviously toppers for crocheted and knitted hats, and so many other ideas. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in just making a whole bunch of pom-poms with your scrap yarns, to go on to Pinterest and look for all the things that you can make with them. I have the Knitter's Pride pom-pom makers in different sizes, but Clover also makes a set. One thing that I did with pom-poms a couple of years ago was to make these little owl ornaments. These are super easy to make, and you just need your scrap yarn. I used a little piece of felt for the nose and some safety eyes. I turned these into little Christmas ornaments with a little bell and a little ornament wooden tag thingy, and they're just so cute and fun to make. And I'll leave a link for the tutorial for these in the description box below. I found this next idea from the crafting queen, Martha Stewart herself. You can use your yarn scraps to make really beautiful wrapping for gifts. On Martha Stewart's website, they are using plain colored wrapping paper and then just wrapping the yarn around it like a bow. And I think they look really interesting, especially as they spaced the yarn out and made it look like a little geometric stripe across the package. I thought those looked so great. You could use plain brown craft paper, which I love that look. It's very rusticy and minimal looking, but you can also find a set of 6 different color solid wrapping paper rolls on Amazon. And you could do this for all the different seasons, for baby gifts, wedding showers, Christmas, birthdays, you name it. Decorating greeting cards is another super simple way to use up those yarn scraps. I made these Christmas cards 2 years ago with my scrap yarns, and I think they turned out so cute, and I had so much fun making them. All I needed was scrap yarn, blank cards, and some markers. I'll leave a link for the tutorial for these in the description box below, but you'll also find a ton of other ideas on, you guessed it, Pinterest. When I was searching online for ideas for what to do with your scrap yarn, I came across something called string art. This looks like so much fun. I totally want to do this. So you're going to need a few supplies for this, and obviously you're going to need yarn scraps. They also have string art wooden canvases, and I found some that were pretty inexpensive on Amazon. You'll also need little nails, and in my research I discovered that you want some smaller nails that aren't just going to poke all the way through the back. So I found these little tiny itty bitty nails, and I will link them in the description box below as well. You'll also need a string art design or pattern. You can totally come up with your own. They're really simple ones where you could just make a little heart or a star or any other kind of simple shape. But there are other ones that spell words, and they all look so amazing. You'll find tons of ideas and free string art patterns on Pinterest. And I actually have a link to my favorite ones in the description box below. I'm going to run out of scrap yarn because there are so many amazing projects that I want to make with scrap yarn that I don't think I'm going to have enough. And this next project is one that I am so excited about. It is so amazing, and it's also from mypoppet.com. You can use any scraps that you have. It doesn't matter the weight for this one. You can combine different weights. It doesn't matter the lengths, and it is a scrap yarn basket. All you need to do for this project is to tie your scraps together. You don't even need to do a Russian join. Then you're going to hold 2, 3, 4 strands all at the same time and use a big old crochet hook like a 9mm. You can make this basket as small or as large as you want, and you can only work on it until you run out of yarn scraps and then just keep going as you accumulate more. What I love about this project is it doesn't matter what colors. You're not trying to color coordinate this. You're just using up your scraps. It also doesn't matter the weights because you're just going to combine them all together, and you're going to be using single crochet, so it's going to be a nice and tight little basket. And you'll find a link to all of the directions, all the details in the description box below. The next project is for those of you that use a lot of 100% wool. You can make felted dryer balls. All you have to do is join together your 100% wool scraps by just tying a knot. Then wind up those scraps into a ball about the size of a tennis ball. Then take that yarn ball and stuff it into a pantyhose leg and tie both ends. Then stick it in the washing machine and wash in hot water. Then put it in the dryer and just make sure it is completely dry. And you may have to repeat that process until it is completely felted. This next project is a blast from the past. As a Gen Xer, a kid from the 80s, I made a ton of friendship bracelets. Anybody else made all of those friendship bracelets and you got your embroidery floss and you braided it and you made all these beautiful designs? I had so much fun with that. And this is a new version with yarn. I found this idea on the Red Ted Art website, and it is especially great for kids. You're going to use yarn scraps and then create a little loom with a piece of cardboard. This would be so much fun to use up those yarn scraps and get kids interested in all types of yarn crafts. This next project is perfect for those of you who are moms of little ones, or maybe you're a grandma of little ones, or you know some little ones that would enjoy a little craft for themselves. I actually had something like this when my kids were little, and they were little foam pieces where they could take a shoelace and string them in and out. This project would be perfect for the child who is ready to use a yarn needle and a scrap of yarn. I found this project on Aunt Annie's Crafts website. All you do is get cardstock, and you can print out all of these different shapes and designs that she has on her website. Then you get a hole punch, punch the holes around the little shape, and then you just get a darning needle or a yarn needle that is large, it's got a big eye, and it also is blunt on the end. Use your yarn scrap, and then they can practice learning how to stitch going in and out of those holes with the yarn and the needle. I thought this was a really fun way to include kids and grandkids into your crafting. I hope you feel as excited as I do to use up your yarn scraps. Let me know in the comment section what is your favorite way to use up your yarn scraps, and if you're going to choose any of these projects. But I hope you all stay safe out there and happy stitching.